Well, for more insight the impact of ransomware attacks, let's bring in Scott Schober. He is the president and CEO of Berkeley Veritronic Systems. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Sure. So I want to start with this $50 million ransom against Saudi Aramco, the world's most valuable oil company. Do you see Saudi Aramco paying this ransom to secure its 1 terabyte of data, or is there a different recourse?
Well, certainly I could see them paying because they probably have the funds to do that. That being said, most of the time, these ransomware cases, they'll negotiate it down to a significant amount that they might actually negotiate it down before they'll actually proceed ahead and pay. And what's interesting about most of the ransomware attacks that we're starting to see lately, look at Colonial Pipeline, which wasn't too long ago, they're larger amounts that they're asking. It used to be in the days where they're asking thousands and then tens of thousands. Now we're seeing ransoms being asked in the millions. And a lot of the targeted companies, you'll notice, are billion-dollar-plus valuations. So in other words, they have deeper pockets, and they have more to lose if they don't pay out the ransomware. And a lot of this seems to be coming from the dark side. This is a Russian-based hacking group. They were believed to be behind the Colonial Pipeline hack, and I believe many of these other attacks they're also behind. And what they do is they actually provide ransomware as a service. So they work in conjunction closely with other cyber criminal gangs and actually help them out to target specific companies so they can perform these ransomware attacks.
So much to unpack there. I'm glad you brought up, first of all, Colonial Pipeline, which, that attack really paralyzed oil supplies to the eastern United States. Now, that one affected operations. This one on Saudi Aramco, just its data. But would you say it's any less dangerous?
No, I think each one can be dangerous in its own right because of all the effects of all of the suppliers and companies that work in conjunction with them, plus just the natural fear that it puts out. People say, well, if they're affecting the distribution, how is that in turn going to affect this? How is that in turn going to affect the stock market, so on and so forth? It's a lot of the unknowns, which causes a sense of almost like a panic. And it reminds me similar to like a terrorist attack. Sometimes the actual fear of the unknown causes more damage than the actual specific attack. And that's the very case with ransomware. And that's what they want. They want to instill fear and a sense of urgency, which is going to make the victim that's being targeted going to pay the ransom much quicker. That's their goal.
And I'm glad you also brought up this whole issue about deep pockets, because I suppose I wonder, why is the energy industry such a prime target for hackers? I mean, is it purely monetary, or is there more of a political bent, anything more subversive?
Probably a combination of things. Certainly, these hackers are going after the money, and clearly the energy sector has a lot of money. And the other thing that I think they're doing is they're looking at the energy sector as a whole, and unfortunately, it's difficult to secure and protect critical infrastructure, that being energy, and a lot of the other areas too. When you look at water, you look at sewer, you look at gas, it's difficult. You look at nuclear to protect all these assets globally. And unfortunately, many of these critical infrastructure sectors have a combination where they're tied into the government. They're also privatized, like Colonial Pipeline, for example, and they're using old legacy systems. And therefore, they can't keep up with the upgrades. And if it's not supported anymore, it's got more known vulnerabilities. Guess what? Hackers know this, cyber criminals know this, and that's where they're going for that low-hung fruit, the easier vulnerabilities that they in turn can exploit and hence perform these ransomware attacks.
I mean, I have to ask, you talk about these known vulnerabilities, so why aren't companies doing more to beef up their cybersecurity?
Well, they are. In fairness, it's just not easy to do because if you look at the sheer size of these networks, and it's not just like we go on our personal home computer and you run an antivirus software and you update it. These systems are very intricate, and there's thousands of computers involved, and they're handling sensors and meters and lots of different things. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and it can be very disruptive. You can't just jump in there and start doing these things and mixing it up. Security takes over a period of time, in some cases many years, to fully upgrade just within a specific capacity of the infrastructure there. So it is happening. They are making great strides. What we don't hear about is all the failed attempts that aren't going through, because this is usually kind of hushed because they don't want people to be scared. But unfortunately, when the ransomware attacks are successful and they make headlines, people start to wonder and say, this is concerning, it's getting worse.
Scott Schober, so lovely to hear from you. Thank you so much for your insight.
Oh, great to join. Thanks again for having me.